This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the Mixed Doubles Podcast. We're your hosts, Maggie Robinson
and Josh Smythe McCauley.
We're former D1 athletes and colleagues at the NFL and NBA with a passion for all things women's sports. If you're interested in more content, please follow us at Mixed Doubles Pod on Instagram. That's 1D, the Mix and the Double. Share it. And don't forget to rate the show. Throw us a little 5 stars if you like what you're hearing. And Josh, take it away.
All opinions stated here are our own and have no affiliation with our employers whatsoever.
Always got to get that out. Okay. Welcome back to our interview series. Today's guest is Sierra Brooks. Sierra was an incredible gymnast at the University of Michigan, where she was a 13-time All-American, 3-time Big Ten Gymnast of the Year, recipient of the Big Ten Medal of Honor and the AAI Award, which is called the Heisman Trophy of Women's Gymnastics. She helped lead Michigan to its first ever NCAA championship in 2021 and excelled both on the mat and in the classroom. We are so excited to have her on to talk about collegiate gymnastics, NIL, and her pursuits outside of the sport. Welcome to the pod, Sierra.
Thank you. I'm excited.
We're excited to have you. So I guess we'll just kind of jump right in. Obviously, from that bio, you've had so much sustained success throughout your college career. Can you share how you got into gymnastics and what drew you to the sport originally?
Yep. So I was one of those people who started gymnastics really young. So I started gymnastics when I was 3. So when you start gymnastics really young, it's basically like parent taught classes is what they call it. So it's like you and your mom usually like walking around a gym and like put you down a mat and just do different things like that. So started when I was 3. Other sports that I did too, I did swimming and I did dance. And I think around the time that I was probably around like 5 or 6 years old, I just didn't really enjoy either of those other sports. I definitely wanted to go to gymnastics a lot more than I wanted to go to dance or wanted to go to swimming. So kind of just faded out over time in terms of those 2 sports. And so I ended up stopping swimming and dance and then just continuing on with only gymnastics, mostly out of interest, but also gymnastics is a sport where athletes tend to really like focus on it and not do any other sports really early. A lot of other sports, you can keep doing multiple sports through high school and then dropping off a lot later. But gymnastics, with the amount of time we practice and stuff, it was a lot earlier. So that's a kind of the timeline. And then I just really liked gymnastics because there's a lot of like individualism in the sense that you can pick your skills and you're competing alone. It's a little bit less of a team sport. And I also thought like the striving towards perfection was really cool. Like you're able to see your growth a lot. You're always competing and getting immediate feedback on how you did. So it was really cool to always like go to meets, get that feedback, and then also just work new skills in the gym. Like there's always skills that you don't know. So
did you focus on one, apologies for not knowing this, did you focus on like one skill? Did you have like something that you were like a master at, or what was your specialty?
Yeah, like when I was younger.
I guess both. Like did you kind of do all of them when you were younger and then just focus on one?
Fair. Yeah. No, that's a good question. I was an all-arounder, so growing up, most athletes are, in the sense that we'll just like compete all 4 events if you can and you're able to. Most gymnasts who come to any club meet are competing all the events, vault, bars, beam, and floor. And then when you go to college is when that tends to drop off, depending on like what the team needs and if they have enough routines on whatever event. I was lucky enough to compete all around in college too, so that meant I competed all the events. So that was really cool and something I did throughout my entire career. So never really specialized or anything. And it's hard to pinpoint to like my best event, in my opinion. Like I think it went through waves where vault was really good or went through waves where bars was really good, which is really cool to look back and see. But yeah, always all 4 events.
That is so impressive. I feel like we need to pause here and take that in. It's hard enough to be excellent at one. To be at your level for all 4 is like actually incredible. Were you recruited as all around too? Like is that how they designate you going in?
Kind of. It's different from like track where it's like you're coming in and you're doing these events. So when they recruit you, they don't necessarily say you're going to be competing all around because like I said, like they don't know what the team needs at any given point. So when I was recruited, I think it's like the intention is to recruit almost always all-arounders. Like
totally.
If you're a coach, it makes most sense. Like you're going to get the most bang for your buck if you get an athlete who can do all 4 events really well. So I think from that lens, I was recruited as an all-arounder. But I think I still surprised myself. Like when I came in as a freshman, I was like, I'm going to compete wherever the team needs me. Like it's fine. And then I talked to my coaches and they're like, no, like you're expected to be an all around. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. So I think recruited for it for sure. and happy that it panned out that way too, but never something that I expected before college.
Wow. That is, again, just so impressive. And you kind of talked about this in the beginning of how, like, you're always seeing your scores, you're always getting immediate feedback, you're striving for perfection. That kind of can also lend itself to being super stressful, I would imagine, of it's just you by yourself. And if you mess up, you're the only one to fall back on, How did you work with those pressures? Did you feel them internally or externally? Like, was that harder once you got to college? Would love to hear about that.
That's a good question. I'd say growing up, I was very fortunate in the sense that like my parents are not like overbearing sports parents who didn't put a lot of like external pressure on me. And I think on the same time, like my coaches had high expectations for me, but they were more in like a motivating sense. Like I never felt like, oh my God, I need to live up to what they think I can do at any given time. So I'd say like external pressures were pretty low throughout my club career, which was really nice. I think any pressure that I did have was what I put on myself, where it was like, I know I'm really good and this meet didn't go how I wanted it to be, and more like frustrations kind of as you just grow up and do all of these meets and kind of just have all of those different points in your athletic career. So say growing up, be more internal, less external. And I'd say that honestly continued through college. Like there's a lot more eyes on you in college, as you can imagine. So definitely a lot of opinions. We talk about the Gymternet all the time. It's basically like where all college gymnastics fans live. They all live on Twitter. If you're ever curious, Gymternet is like a phrase that they use to reference like gymnastics fans online. So you like come into college, and then for me, like I didn't use Twitter till I got to college, and you like see all these opinions and everything like that. And it's definitely a ton of information and a ton of voices, but it's also indicative of the fact that like our sport has a lot of fans. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing at all. But I think as an athlete competing, you just have to get really good at knowing what matters and knowing what doesn't. Ultimately, we know our gymnastics really well. And like, if we have a bad meet, we know it's bad before anyone else can tweet about it or tell us. So there's pressure from them in the sense like you can see things that frustrate you and you want to prove yourself because people think that this is digressing or something wasn't as good as it should have been. But I think if you're able to like have a good understanding and just have the perspective of the fact that these are random people online who don't know everything, like all the ins and outs about your training, then you're able to block it out. And I think that's kind of how I was throughout my time at Michigan. Internal pressure is still there for sure. I think towards the end of my career, I felt like I had more pressure to perform at the levels I had before. So it was more like comparing myself against myself, where it was like this year, like my sophomore year, I was really good at whatever event it was. Like I could stick all the time. How come I'm not sticking all the time now? And it's 3 years later. So I think I had more pressure from that standpoint where you're trying to almost beat yourself. So just had to be really aware of it and like talk that through with people too, because I think it can lead to frustrations at times. Like I would go to my coaches and be like, I'm so mad about whatever it is. And they're like, you're still doing really good. Like this isn't a bad thing. Like a lot of people would be happy with what you're doing right now and just kind of having that like mental pivot. So I'd say to summarize that, yeah, not too much external. I think thanks to the people surrounding me who didn't really push that on me, but more internal, where at the end it totally was trying to compete against myself.
Yeah. I think having high standards is such a double-edged sword as an athlete, because you're always like, but I know that could have felt better. And I look at myself last year and like, I know that was better than it was.
Exactly.
And it's so hard to like listen to the people who are trying to be helpful and say, no, you're still great. Like, good job. No, it's so,
exactly.
I know.
Well, I felt it and I can tell you.
Great. We're not in my body right now.
Yeah.
But I know it. Yeah.
No,
For sure.
no, it's funny. It's good to have a village for sure, but absolutely, Maggie, you're right, and Sierra, you're right. Like being an athlete and trying to get up to your standards is really all that matters. And then also, I guess, trying to avoid trolls online. And it's funny too, because obviously, I didn't know about the Gymternet, and I feel like it's great that's on Twitter. There's so many spaces on Twitter. Like you have NBA Twitter, Black Twitter, all great spots. So now I'm gonna have to find myself on the Gymternet at some point and just see what's going on.
It's so funny. My younger brother, he is like 17 years old, but he like grew up with me doing gymnastics, so he knows it really well. And he will text me and be like, my entire Twitter now is just like the Gymternet. Even after I retired, he's like, I'm still seeing so many gymnastics tweets. Like, it's gonna take a while to leave your algorithm, but yeah, you should just take a look one time. It's interesting.
I'll dabble. I want to go back to kind of your process of getting to Michigan, and we noticed you left high school early, so just wanted to hear from you what that was like and how it kind of impacted, I guess, your freshman year at Michigan, obviously probably being on the younger end and then getting through college and having to compete at a high level?
Yeah. Yep. So I committed to Michigan, I think October of my freshman year of high school. So recruiting was super early. This was before they changed all the rules. Like now no one can commit, even like verbally commit at that time. But anyways, you could do it at that time. So we started getting recruited early middle school. And then I had friends who were committing anywhere from like 8th grade to freshman year of high school. So very normalized in the gymnastics space at that time. But in terms of like what drew me to Michigan, I'm from Illinois. I knew that I liked the Midwest and I didn't want to go too far. So that was one piece for me. And then I'd say I'm equally as interested in and like care about academics as I do athletics. So for me, it was really important that I went to a school that was very competitive academically as well. And I think Michigan is just a really good mix of both. And I think that's like the main reason I ended up picking Michigan, along with the fact that like I enjoyed the coaches. I had gone to the campus. It was really nice. But that's like some of the logic behind my decision. But yeah, graduating early, something I didn't expect. We have every once in a while you'll talk with your college coaches while you're recruited just to like check in and see how things are going. And I had one of those regularly scheduled calls with one of my assistant coaches at Michigan. And he was like, by the way, like we had this athlete who was coming. She was like class of 2019 of high school who was coming because of various reasons. She's not coming anymore. So a scholarship has opened up a year early. So basically it was just like, if you want to come early in 2019, you can. If you don't, it's fine. Like you'll just have the scholarship the next year. Like it's not a big deal. So there wasn't a ton of pressure, I guess, from his end, which was good. And I think when I initially heard this, I think took it as a joke. I was like, oh, like, haha, it's March of 2019. Yeah. August is really soon. I probably wouldn't go early. And then about, I think, 2 weeks to a month later, I was actually on campus at Michigan just for a visit to watch a meet. Had a conversation in person where coach basically like brought it up again and was like, just so you know, like the offer still stands and like we'd love you to come early, like if you could. Still knowing it's definitely my decision. And we like talked about like the actual logistics of that, like how would it work, because I missed application deadlines and like all these other logistical components. Talked it through where it started to sound feasible. And then basically I had around like 6 days to decide, I think, because then there was like a true deadline and like making sure that I could get into the school. So I gave myself the 6 days, talked to like my club coaches, was talking to teachers, like all these different things, cried so many tears because I was overwhelmed by the decision. But ultimately decided to graduate early. I think level 10 is basically the highest level in club gymnastics before you become an elite gymnast. And I didn't intend to ever do elite. And I had been doing level 10 like since 6th grade. So I had competed at the same level for so many years, had the same routines, had been really successful at JO Nationals and all those things. So gymnastics wise, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready for college. And then same with academics. I was in a place where I was already ready to graduate, was extremely indifferent about high school. So it's like, there's nothing that I'm missing out from a high school standpoint. Like I was talking to people and they're like, well, stay for prom and stay for whatever. And I was like, I really don't, I don't know. That stuff didn't matter as much to me. So after weighing it all out, I was like, okay, I'll go early. So made the decision, announced it to the team, and it was just something that I had to like prepare for at that point. I think it was a good decision for me. I think like the timing is one of those things where obviously it's what happened. So I look back and I'm like, it worked out great, but I think it was really good for me. Like freshman year was awesome. I love my class, like so many things that would have been different if I came the next year. And I do think it was cool coming in on the younger side and like seeing my growth as I got older. Like I came in at 17 and then stayed obviously like through my 5th year where I was 22 on the team and like seeing the leadership and just, I think getting so much experience on different teams has been really cool. And then also in hindsight, COVID happened. My senior year of high school would have been bad anyway. Yeah.
You dodged the bullet.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like honestly kind of glad like that happened. So that was a long answer, but that's kind of the early graduation process.
No, that's amazing. And I'm glad to hear like in hindsight, you're still very happy with the decision. That's great. That's what you want. You said something though about kind of the difference, or I guess you could explain to us the difference between level 10 gymnast and an elite gymnast and like what that kind of difference in level of commitment looks like. Like, I guess asking if you're comfortable answering why you weren't kind of interested in that next step.
Yep. I got that question actually pretty recently, or it comes up. Basically, at least when I was a club gymnast, when you're younger, they like your coaches present you basically, it's like 2 different pathways. If you're like at a high level of competition, it's like, would you be interested in going elite? You don't go elite. Typically, gymnasts will go like the collegiate gymnastics route. And that was very much like how it was growing up. And elite gymnastics was like where you're competing for Team USA, you're competing at Worlds. You have the chance to potentially compete at the Olympics. That's the elite route. And elite gymnasts are training like 30 plus hours a week. They're usually homeschooled. A lot of them will move to different states just to get better coaching. So it's just truly like most of your life is focused on gymnastics more than it already is. And then the other route is you're going to compete at level 10, which is still very competitive. You still have the chance to get a collegiate scholarship. But those were kind of like the two routes. And I think for me, as I said earlier, like I loved school so much. So the thought of being homeschooled, I hated it. I was like, I love school. Like I didn't want to sacrifice that. And as much as I loved gymnastics, I didn't think it was something that I ever wanted to do. So my coach presented me that option. He didn't really coach elite gymnasts, but was like, if you're really good. He's coached me for basically my entire career before college. And he was like, I'd be willing to coach you for elite. Like we could do this if you really wanted to, but I turned that down pretty young. Like this was probably still around that 6th grade time. But I was like, I'm very aware of the fact that I don't want gymnastics to be my entire life. And that's kind of why I stepped away and chose not to do elite gymnastics. Because college gymnastics to me always sounded awesome. So I was like, I'm happy with that route. But I will say one thing that's changed, like since I was a club gymnast, because of NIL and because of that being in place now, you see a lot of elite gymnasts and like Olympic gymnasts come back and do college gymnastics, where that used to be very siloed because usually gymnasts would go to the Olympics, they'd like declare that they're a pro athlete, and then you're therefore ineligible in the NCAA. So because of those changes, it's been cool to see a lot of like Olympic gymnasts in the NCAA because that was something that was not an option when I was growing up.
Oh, that's so interesting. No, Maggie, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say it's incredibly self-aware of you at 6th grade to be like, you know what? Academics, that's it. Like that foresight as a what? How old are you in 6th grade?
Like 12, yeah.
That's insane. That's really like that shows that you knew what you wanted and you like stuck to it. I respect that.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Like, I don't know if I could make a decision for myself at 6th grade, and like instrumental to the rest of your life and your career.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm gonna stick with my guns here and stay the academic route. And I'm very good at this, but y'all can have it. I'm good.
I think it's also like elite gymnastics still like at the time had a very like intense connotation with it. Like in the gymnastics world, you probably heard so many stories about like crazy coaching and stuff, like especially since when I was younger. I think that was also something that pushed me away too, because I thrive in more like casual environments. Like I work really hard, but I don't need like insanely like intense environments. And I think I associated that with elite gymnastics as well. And I was like, I don't think I'd like it. So that was another factor.
No, it's great parenting too. I think if you look at it, right? Because like, I'm sure you hear all the stories, and you were in the community more than we were. Mm-hmm. There's parents that probably push their kids into that route that are probably against what they actually want to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm very, very thankful that my parents were like, do whatever you want. You like it, you don't want to do it, don't do it.
Yeah, that's special. And another question too, kind of going back now to Michigan again. So as you were going through the recruiting process, I think you did a great job of explaining like, here's why I want to go there. And if anybody's listening to this podcast and you're in the middle of a recruiting process, like think about it like Sierra would think about it, right? Is it a good school? What are my priorities? Did the school match up to my priorities? That's probably the best way to go about it. But one thing we noticed, right? Like you were there, you won, you helped Michigan win their first gymnastics championship. Was that a goal of yours as you were going to the school? Was that anything like that deterred you, that they hadn't had that level of success, like they hadn't reached the pinnacle before you got there? Was that something you considered at all?
Surprisingly, no. Like, I think I considered like the culture of the school. And like I said, like I enjoyed like the feel when I was on campus. I enjoyed the coaches. And I'd say it was also cool because we'd go on these recruiting visits and I met the girls who were committed to go to Michigan and loved them. So I knew probably at least like 70% of my teammates like ahead of time before I showed up freshman year, and like already had good relationships with them. So I think all those factors came in, and we were like really big, like really good recruiting classes for Michigan, like my class and the class above me. So I think that was a motivating factor too, is like you see who's going to the school and who's going to be there with you. So I knew we were going to be like a really competitive program, but I actually don't think it was ever in the forefront of my mind like I want to go to this school and like help bring home the first national championship. And I also don't think it's something that ever pushed me away from Michigan at the same time either. They're really successful in the Big Ten, and I think that's like obviously what they like market and talk about. So I heard that and I'm like, that's awesome. And I honestly like feel like I didn't really start paying attention to NCAAs until I was a freshman on a team and was like, oh wait, that's so cool. We should try to win this. I don't know. I know a lot of like gymnasts who are like, I'm going to go to this school because they won the most NCAA championships and I want to have one, which is so fair. But I don't think that was my driving factor behind going.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, selfless, talented, like
what can she do? My gosh. Speaking of what can't you do, you breezed past this. You were a 4-time Junior Olympics national team member. For people like Josh and myself who are unfamiliar with the system, clearly, were you competing both there and at Michigan at the same time, or was this all growing up? Like, how is that different than like being pulled into the Olympic pool if that's elite gymnastics, you know?
Yeah. No, that's fair. Basically, Junior Olympics is our nationals in like high school or club gymnastics. So this was before I went to Michigan. Every year, like the way that level 10 club gymnastics works, you compete, you have all these meets, and then you have to qualify to state, which is just like a certain score that you need. You have to qualify to regionals, which I think is still a certain score, like all around score. And then there's nationals, and basically when I was there, they would take like the top 8 gymnasts in the all around, and they would comprise like a certain age group's team for a certain region at nationals. And nationals is like the last beat of the season. That's it. And then if you place in the top 4 in the all around in your age group at nationals, then you're a part of like the national team, the JL national team. Which what came out of that, it's like you go to a camp. Usually like they'd have like a Junior Olympic like national team camp that you could go to, which used to be the ranch in Texas and stuff. So that's kind of like, it's something that you get to say you were part of, which is really cool. But it was very separate from elite gymnastics, and it all took place before college. So I think I just placed like randomly like 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and then I ended up winning my last nationals, which is really cool.
Wow. That is, again, so impressive. There was a similar thing for soccer, which it's funny because like you kind of laughed when I said like junior nationals. It's called like Olympic development team for soccer.
Okay.
Like, sure, if I was on like the regional Olympic development team, like went to Germany, whatever. But it's like, it's its own system, and it's like kind of a joke, but like not really.
No, exactly. Like it's very like legitimate in the space of club gymnastics, but it's not as like,
it's not applicable to actual Olympics.
Not the same as like the actual national team. It's very different.
Yeah. It just borrows words that sound really important, but doesn't actually tie to them.
Yeah. You say it and people are like, oh my God. I'm like, before, whoa, where are you going? Make sure you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, that's still really impressive though.
I think one of the things that's really cool and just alluring about being a student athlete is that people, I would say the majority of people don't know exactly what it's like to be a student athlete. Obviously, it's a small pool of people just nationally, especially at the Division I level. It's cool that we are all in a position to kind of experience that. But what's special about it is that those experiences are vastly different for the sports you play, for the school you go to, et cetera. I'm sure Maggie and I's experiences of playing football and soccer at Columbia and Penn are vastly different. But for you, like, one, would love to understand just like obviously a day in your life as a gymnast at Michigan, but just really getting into like what makes being a gymnast distinct from other athletes, from other sports on campus, what you kind of had access and resources to. I think too, like how serious the sport was taken at Michigan, maybe how you felt like the sport was taken, I guess, nationally from the NCAA, et cetera. So just like getting into some of that nitty gritty.
I can start with the kind of like day in the life, which is probably similar to other sports. I'll say like a random day in preseason. We would probably like wake up. I might have lifted in the morning. We lifted around 3 days a week in preseason. So lift at, I'm forgetting things now, I think 6.
All removed.
And not even a year removed. I'm like, what did I do everything? Did this for 5 years. But yeah, so we lift in the morning. We usually had classes at anywhere from like 8 to 1 or 8 to 2 p.m. Eating lunch, whenever. Practice would start at 1 or 2 for us. Basically alternate each day. Practice was around like 3.5 hours in length. We start off practice actually with like training room. So a lot of us tape our ankles. People see that all the time on TV, but taping your ankles, just making sure that our bodies are ready for gymnastics, because it's definitely not a sport you can just like warm up. You can't warm up doing like your full routines and skills. Like you can't like do one and be like, oh, okay, like now I'm warm. It's like we need to make sure our bodies are in a good place to actually flip and bend and do all of those things. go through practice. People, I always think of these things that when you talk about other sports and like how a practice is run, I was going to like skip over it, but I'll talk about it. We usually, it's like you'll warm up. So we have like a gymnastics warm up. And then we usually would split into like 2 or 3 groups, just given the fact that we have multiple events to train. Usually we'll train 3 events in a given practice, alternating between vault and floor, because vault and floor are like the pounding events. So are like most damage to the body essentially. So you'd split into those 3 groups and however way we split groups that day. And then it's like 45 minutes on each rotation. Each coach running that specific event will come up with an assignment, and then we'll work through the assignment. Assignments oftentimes are just the routines that you guys see us do. Other times, though, it's like only working a certain section. So you might work only a certain skill. You might work upgrades, such as training new skills. But that's how practice is structured. And then we might end with some sort of conditioning or something. But generally, day-to-day, that's how it works. Finish practice, do any rehab, and then from there, it depends on the person. Some people had class after that. For me, yeah, some days I had class after that. Other times I would just go to our academic center and just study, eat dinner, and then go to sleep and then run it back the next day. So that's that piece of it. And then pivoting a little bit to the second piece, which was just like gymnastic specific things and like how gymnastics is viewed at Michigan. I will say it's a very like well-respected sport at Michigan. I'd say it's one of the more popular women's sports, which is really cool to be a part of. Gymnastics is very unique in the sense that like the women's side of the sport is more popular than the men's side because we also have like a men's gymnastics program. So it was really unique having that perspective, like being the team where it's like we're talking to the men's gymnastics team and they're complaining about like, oh, we don't get whatever. And we're like the ones who are like, oh, well, we get 6 new Leos every year. Like something super rare. So I think that's something that's really unique. And I'd say another way gymnastics is really interesting or just different from some other sports is just like the individual component because of the fact that we compete all by ourselves. I'd say like the way we approach practice and the way we approach meets and like a lot of just like the mental like choreography and practice that goes into it is really big. And I think that's a big thing with like any sport, but gymnastics in particular, there's a lot that goes into it. We might have assignments where it's like, okay, like put yourself in this situation, like this has already happened, like this teammate did whatever, and now you have to make up for it. And that's really interesting, just given the fact that there's no one else to like put blame on or point to in a gymnastics meet because it's one person going. So that's really cool. And then I think it's just unique that women's gymnastics is growing right now. It's definitely like everyone talks about it, especially after the Olympics, which has happened for years. But it's cool being in collegiate gymnastics, especially when the Olympians come back to college. We're just seeing the sport take off. But those are some of the ways I'd say gymnastics is different. I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
I was just going to say, so I was a goalkeeper in soccer, and I can so relate to like the individual aspect of it.
Oh, no.
I genuinely, this is something that I like tried to work on in college. Did you have any like mental routines? Were you visualizing? What were you taking yourself through before practice to make sure that you were like staying mentally like with it? You know, it's hard. And it's you on you and you're already hard on yourself. Like, man.
I know. I feel like our team as a whole, like driven by our coaches, we did a lot of like we called it mental choreography. Like we'd go to beam, you do your beam assignment. And then after beam, you would like stand at the end of the beam and close your eyes and like visualize your routine 3 times through and stuff like that. That like we all really did. And I think for me, I just use that. We also talked a lot about just like the verbal cues in your head. Like we're talking to ourselves like through all of our routines and you just try to make sure that voice is really consistent in every routine. Like you can't let in the things where you're like, oh, that felt weird. Like you have to like keep going and keep the groove of your routines going. And I think those are the things I really leaned into. And I also say I was like someone who rarely had any like fear issues growing up and stuff like that and went through college without anything big as well, which was really good. But I think even towards the end of my career, which was like mostly in college, there were points where I started to like feel like I was overthinking things. Like I would start to think through like, how am I physically able like to do this skill? And then you're like thinking, I should not do that. And I think I had a little bit of that come in. So almost on the flip side, I also at times tried not to think things through. Like I was a really good person where like I could be in a full conversation with you at the end of the vault runway and then it was my turn to go and I could just go vault and it was fine. And that works better for me than like sitting there thinking about exactly what I'm going to do ahead of time. So I'd say those were some of the pieces. When it came to me, same thing. I'm like, just, you know what you do. Like I was really big on I trained numbers as heavily as I could. And I say that because our coaches definitely stopped us. Like when you get to college, we compete every single weekend back to back to back. So you can't do too many routines in practice. But I'm someone who competed best when my confidence was high. My confidence was going to be higher if I could do as many numbers as possible. So I did that best of my abilities. And I think that definitely like transferred over too and got me through some of like the individual aspects where it's like, okay, you've done this hundreds of times. Like just go do your routine.
I might be dumb and I might have missed it. What are numbers? Is that like the amount of
Number like reps,
okay.
essentially.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I just always, said numbers. But basically, just like doing routines, how many routines I did that day. I would try to do as many as possible. But a lot of times my coaches would be like, you're not doing any more. Which,
the more you
whatever.
know.
Yeah.
You're like, no, I'll keep...
But I was like, okay, I get it.
They're looking out for you. They had you.
They are. I know. I got better with it towards the end of my career. But better is very relative.
Yeah.
But it was funny. They're like, hey, you wobbled one time and then you went and did 3 more. You're done.
Good on them, honestly. But I feel you. I would have been like, let me get a couple more and I'm good.
Exactly.
I think a fun question to talk about is the fact that you were in college when NIL became legal. And just wanting to understand what the difference was for you, kind of those first, 2-3 years?
Yep.
2 years in college, and then post NIL in 21, how you felt that shift. And then obviously you kind of touched on it earlier, like talking about some of the Olympians coming back and things of that nature. So
it is really interesting. And I always tell people like I'm very happy that I got to see college before NIL. Like I think NIL is awesome. I'm all for athletes making money because I think it's something that they're very deserving of. But it definitely has changed things. Like before NIL, obviously it was highly regulated. There's so many things that you can't do. It's annoying. Like there's compliance, right? And they're telling you can't talk to these people. You can't accept this. And there's all these rules. But that's how it had been for years. And then I remember when NIL happened, it was definitely something that was rushed. No one expected it. Like at Michigan in particular, no one was really expecting that to happen. So I was our SAC president because of that. Like I feel like we had tons of conversations on like what Michigan was doing and like what to communicate out and like just a lot. Like everyone was frazzled. I feel like the entire world, like in the NCAA, was frazzled to some degree. And it started to get better over time. But I'd say the biggest changes I noticed my last few years, like after NIL, was just like, I don't know, like almost most athletes, right? It's like you come to college, you're expected to like take care of your academics and your athletics. And I think after NIL like added this third pillar where like most athletes felt like they should be doing more in some way, shape, or form. Like not every athlete had intentions to do NIL and like wanted to do it. But I think right now our world is very like social media heavy. Because of that, I think so many athletes felt like they had to push content out or like be a mini influencer, make sure they're pulling in deals. Like that's definitely how I felt. And I try to stay true to my priorities and focus on athletics and academics. And like if something came up that I wanted to do, I would do it. But I do think it is something that is really cool. But we have seen some sort of shift in terms of like athletes just having like this third piece of pressure. And I don't even know where the pressure is coming from. But this pressure to just engage in NIL because it's something that wasn't there and that is now there. So it's almost like an opportunity that you're intentionally passing up if you don't engage. So I think I noticed that with my own experiences, also my teammates. And then I'd say it also just has disrupted like college athletics as we know it. Like we've seen the conferences change. We see athletic departments trying to come up with funds that they didn't have to pay athletes. And because of that, programs can get cut and all those things. But yeah, that was kind of my soapbox there where I think it's really good. Sum it up. I think it's good. But I do think there kind of has to be some more regulation across the country because I don't know. Even in the gymnastics world, because of NIL, some teams almost have more athletes on scholarships and all of those things. So it's weird. It's just a lot of conversations that didn't exist prior to NIL.
Yeah. No, we could have a whole pod episode on the future of college athletics and the onset of NIL and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
But it is always interesting just understanding, like, especially someone like you in your position having success at a very big school in Michigan and what was available to you. And, you know, I'm sure, I don't actually know, but if Michigan had a collective, if the collective was only for football, if there was like a collective that was doing stuff with women's sports, you know, you never know.
Yeah. It always changing. I'm like, couldn't even tell you because it was changing so often.
Really, I was just there.
You ever?
I was just there. No, yeah, NIL has been obviously the point of discussion for anytime you're talking with a student athlete right now, and
Oh, yeah.
just understanding like how they're either taking advantage of it or
Mhm.
maybe they're missing out. Obviously at Columbia, there was not, no, people are like, oh, did you partake? No, no, they were going to give me like
Didn't wanna.
$15.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Back to all of your incredible achievements. So you've won all these awards, you got all these accolades. Was there a standout moment in your college career that like really sticks out as like, this was the most fun, this is the one that was most memorable?
Mhm. I think it's still when we won nationals. I feel like whenever people ask that question, I'm like, am I gonna say it? I'm like, I totally gonna say it. I think that year was, I call it the COVID year. It was like the 2020 into 2021 year academically. So all of our classes were online. We had COVID testing every morning at like 6 a.m.
Yeah.
We only left the house to go to practice. So it just was a very hard year, like not fun. And I think our team too, like gymnastics wise, really good team, but we also had a lot of hiccups that year. We didn't win Big Ten regular season, and then we also didn't win Big Ten championships when we were very highly favored, just like bad meets, bad timing, all those things. So I think for us, we had a big like team pivot, headed into regionals, and then that went through nationals and we won and everything. And it was just very, very rewarding. I think after everything, where it's like we're distancing from our parents, like we're not hugging them after meets, like it just was a really hard year. So I think for us, like winning was just so awesome. And then to do it for the first time for Michigan was great. And like seeing the reaction on our coaches' faces and our trainer who's been at Michigan for like 20 plus years, it just was awesome to be an athlete competing there and like really obviously like helping the team from a score perspective, but then also really cool just seeing how big of an impression that made. Yeah, that day was awesome. We always talk about it. Like we woke up, everyone was like in really good moods. Everything went really smooth, like including the me. It just was like such an easy day. So I'm definitely the highlight for me. And then doing that with obviously some of my best friends that are from the team.
Yeah. I mean, that was such an emotional time kind of in general.
Oh yeah.
And then so to do that, and then like you're saying, see that it means so much to so many other people. Like it's way bigger than you. Like, yes, it's like an individualized sport, but like you have all these people surrounding you and like you can feel all their support even though you can't physically be with them. So I can only imagine.
Yeah.
How incredible.
So awesome. We have a group chat with some of my teammates from that team, and we'll like randomly like someone will just send the link to the YouTube video when we won, and they're like watching this tonight.
Okay. Whenever you're down.
Therapeutic for us, yeah.
That is so sweet. Oh my gosh. Wow.
I can't tell you the amount of times if I had won a championship in anything, like at any level, if I had won a middle school basketball championship, whatever, I would pull up that video. Anytime I'm like doubting myself, I'm like,
I just watch myself like go over.
We did that at some point.
Yeah. I need to watch it more. What?
Tap in. Maybe we'll link it.
Oh, we should in the show notes?
Yeah. Find the link, guys.
No, we will. And we will.
Yeah.
You were also awarded the Big Ten Medal of Honor and the AAI award, which, as I said earlier, is like the Heisman Trophy for gymnastics. This is kind of a cliche question, but what did it mean to you to win both of these awards?
Yeah. I think the Big Ten Medal of Honor was really cool because I felt like I was very involved at Michigan, like in gymnastics and then also outside of gymnastics. So it just meant a lot receiving that and seeing that other people like noticed that, I'd say, throughout my career. Really sweet. I also think like getting that your senior year is obviously a great time to do that. Like gives you time to reflect and see everything that you've done. So I think it was great for that purpose and that reason. But the AI award, that one was really cool, I think, for me, because I didn't expect it. First of all, if you watch the video, it's like 6 of us up there. Finalists. I feel like being a finalist, I was like, that made sense. I wasn't surprised that I was a finalist, but did not expect to win. So they're up there, like, say my name, my mouth drops. So I'm like, I did not think I was winning. But it felt cool because it felt like my gymnastics was being recognized, and I've gotten these accolades and everything throughout my career. So it's not like no one was seeing what was happening. But even in terms of the gymnastics landscape in college, usually people are talking about SEC gymnastics, and there's other names that people know a lot more before my name comes up. So I think because of those reasons in my head, I was just like, I'm not expecting this. And then getting it just made me feel like recognized, I guess, from like the national standpoint. So that was awesome. And same thing, we give it to your senior year. So that was just really cool. Also, it was really sweet because this was my senior year and our team didn't make nationals because we lost a tiebreaker, which sucked. But that was nice that like I was still at nationals to compete as an individual, so I was there for the award and stuff. So made the trip that was kind of bittersweet because our whole team wasn't there. It made it a little bit better.
I'm sure they were watching. I'm sure they were like extremely happy for you.
I think I had 3 teammates there with me. So like one of my
Okay.
like took a picture of me like sitting in the chair with my award and was like, "She money come." They don't like stream it. I think they post it probably like moments after, but it was funny. It was cute.
Yeah. Oh, that's so special. That's such a nice way to kind of go out, right? Like just hear. I think if anything, those type of accolades, obviously top of the top, do more for just recognizing what you've accomplished throughout your entire career, not just collegiately, but all the work you put in before that, and just being like, even just being a finalist, being recognized for that.
Yeah, yep, for sure.
And then obviously winning and just being like, yeah, I did that. Just throw that name. Another thing to look towards if you're ever doubting yourself. But what now, kind of going towards the end, what has the transition been like for you? I know Maggie and I have experienced this. You are fresh out of college, essentially.
Yep.
But what has this transition been like for you? You're no longer doing high-level gymnastics, as far as I know.
Yeah.
You're working. You're in a corporate space. Like, what?
Yeah.
How do you feel?
I feel good. Like I do feel good. I think at times, obviously, the transition is weird and bumpy and all those things, but I feel like I took my 5th year, obviously, so I used all my eligibility, and I think doing that was really good for me because I just used everything and there was nothing left on the table. Like, it's like, okay, you did as much gymnastics as you could from an eligibility standpoint. So I'm really happy with that decision. And then I think I also did various internships and stuff throughout school. So at least like working in the corporate environment wasn't like a complete shock. I was like, okay, like, I've done this before in little 2-month stints. So I'd say it's weird. Like being out of college is different, but I also think being at Michigan for 5 years, towards the end of my 5th year, I was like, okay, like I know Michigan almost too well at this point. I think it's time for something new. And I kind of framed it to the point where I was excited to be done, not rushing it, but like my body gets sore from gymnastics. I was excited for my body to feel a little bit better, or excited for like the independence. I think you guys know it if you've been on programs, but like most programs are run pretty tight where I couldn't do a lot of things. And I was excited for some of that just freedom as well. So I think with the transition, I just enjoyed those pieces of it where I'm like, I was not able to do this in the past. And now I can do that. And that's been really good. I miss flipping, but like I said, my body feels good. I don't miss it enough to like suddenly come out of retirement and work toward anything. I just, whenever I'm in a gym, I just make sure that I can still do something. But I ran a half marathon at the end of last year. So did like the typical athlete to running thing.
Was about to ask.
A marathon this year. Yeah. So that's at least what's happening now. But it's been good. And I also think it's really nice. Most of the teammates I'm closest with from Michigan, like 3 of them retired like a year before I did. So it's been very refreshing. And now like our whole like main group is all retired. So we can talk and like really flush through all of these like little hiccups and stuff like that together. And I think that's been awesome. Like one of my teammates texted the other day. She's like, they tell us to prepare for life after sports, but like they didn't tell me what like sitting in a chair for 8 hours was going to do to me. That's
Yeah.
So I think having that support system too has made it easier because I'm like, we're all done. We all lived through all this together. And now we're all doing different things in the real world.
Tell your friend, standing desk, some EDM at like 3. That'll help a little bit. Not enough.
Not enough, but I second the standing desk. Started working in August and I didn't get a standing desk till December and I was losing my mind because we were like, they had to just fix the seating chart and stuff. But I was like, I need to stand. But now I happily use my desk. So.
Oh, yeah. Standing desk does wonders.
It's awesome. It's so good. Yeah.
Man, I gotta get on this. I still don't have. I'm suffering at work.
You'll need one for the last 3 months?
Yeah, really. And I think I'm like, no. But no, Sierra, we've spent so much of this interview talking about your gymnastics career, and obviously you've done so much, but there's so much more to you. And now you're saying you have more independence. And we saw that you're a photographer, you're a graphic designer, you're super creative with your portfolio. It's really impressive.
We stalked
How
you.
did you, we did, to say it bluntly, like we stalked you. Had to do our research. But like, how did you tap into this creative side? And were you doing this in college? Was it important for you to be multidimensional and have different passions?
That's a good question. I think somewhere I have some little like creative bug that I have to get out in some way, shape, or form. Usually in something like super leisure photography, I'm not consistently like booking sessions or stuff like that, but I'll definitely just get in, I don't even know, little moments of time where I'm like, oh, I really want to take photos, or I really want to do graphic design. And I like learning. So like graphic design, that's grown from like middle school to now, where I started with the little apps on my phone or on my iPod and thought it was cool making different edits, and then learned Photoshop as I got older. And I'd say same thing with photography. I've always loved photos like so much, and I love editing photos. And then like got a camera in middle school, and now I have another camera, and just enjoy those a lot. I got into them just out of like pure interest. And then I think, they were really good for me just to have other things to express myself with. And I think gymnastics too. A lot of people assume that I like love sports because I was a gymnast in college, which makes sense, but I'm not like the craziest sport person. I don't follow sports that much, like no more than I feel like a very like average girl who's not following sports. And there's other interests that I have, and I think those are just some of them, and I like sharing them if I can. So it was good to have those outlets and use them when I could.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. You get it. It's so stressful. So you have to put that somewhere. It has to be channeled.
Yeah.
Just like now, you have to channel that like athletic energy somewhere, like to running.
I know. Especially I need to figure out what, but it's like obviously like different parts of the things you do serve different like parts of like yourself, I guess. Like at work, I like math, so I get to do like different analytical things at work. But I was telling somebody else, like, I need to find something that like itches the competitive bug, because I haven't figured that out yet. Like marathon's nice, but I'm not like competing to win this thing.
No.
Like,
You never know. Could mess around. There was that woman who joined the Olympic like bike team this past summer.
I saw that, and she had started like so soon before that.
Yeah, not like obviously hadn't been doing it her whole life and won. So you could find yourself.
Right. Maybe I'll be in LA.
Not off the cards. That'd be special. Just to rewind, Maggie, I don't know if you heard her. She didn't care about our employers at all. That's what I heard. So
I don't like sports.
I don't. Yeah, she's like unfair. No, that's all right.
I do like sports, but I'm not like a sports fanatic who follows. I appreciate them. I like doing them, but I'm just not.
That's
I don't follow it as closely. I think what you guys, I like your employers.
Okay. That's okay. That's why we have jobs. It's like what? You got to turn non-fans into casual fans and casual fans into avid fans. So look, we're starting with somebody who's a casual fan right now. I feel like that I'm comfortable saying that. Now we got to work our magic, get her over to the avid side. Yeah. Okay.
And I'll give you credit.
We'll send you some stuff. We've had you on for so long. So thank you so much for taking this time seriously. To close out, we'll just ask, growing up, being a gymnast, was there anybody that you aspired to be like, that you looked up to? Like, did you have idols that were gymnasts or anybody else?
I'd say like one thing is just in gymnastics, there's people who are always obviously older than you. So I think there were various gymnasts older than me who I like aspired to be to. Like you're level 4 and there's a level 6 gymnast who's really good. And you're like, oh, I want to be like that. So I think just given the club atmosphere, I was able to have people like that. But I would say like biggest idol growing up was Gabby Douglas. She won the Olympics in 2012 and I was like 10 at that time. So I think it was just like really good timing. She was the first black female to win the all around in the US. So just so cool. I thought literally to this day, I don't think she can do anything wrong. So Gabby Douglas was definitely one for me in terms of just like role model gymnast that I love to watch and follow, I think to this day. Simone's obviously awesome too. But if you consider like my age and growing up, like Gabby Douglas was definitely a bigger figure for me.
Yeah. Gabby was the first gymnast I watched on the Olympics. So
that's a good one. So good. I'm hoping she makes the comeback. She tried to come back for this most recent Olympics, but no, maybe LA.
Maybe LA.
Oh, wow.
Maybe you'll see her there.
Exactly. Yeah.
You guys will be besties.
For sure.
Well, thank you so much. This has been so much fun, and I really appreciate your thoughtful answers for taking the time to talk with us. This was great. I had a blast.
Of course. This was fun. Thanks for having me.